and welcome to Global Eye, a program that brings you reporting and investigations from around the globe made by teams from across the BBC World Service. I'm Lisa Vogt, the BBC Russian correspondent here in Berlin, a city that's now a frontline in Europe's struggle against Russian aggression and interference. German officials say there's been an escalation in Russian spying and sabotage, and Germany's top operational commander has warned Moscow now has the capacity for a limited attack against NATO territory. I'll be examining Russia's shadow war against the West and the very real threat that poses. Later in the program, as countries across Europe debate the reintroduction of military conscription, we'll hear from the women preparing for the front line. Now we're going to take you to the crossroads where Europe meets Asia, to Georgia. Since emerging from the collapsing Soviet Union as an independent state in 1991, Georgia is once again the arena of conflicting interests. Last autumn, thousands of protesters took to the streets of the capital Tbilisi to protest at what they saw as their government's failure to advance talks to join the European Union. Now, a BBC investigation has uncovered shocking evidence suggesting that the government used a World War I-era chemical weapon against its own citizens during those demonstrations. Here's their report.
It's November 2024 and protesters are being met by thousands of riot police, backed up by 5-ton water cannons. For a full week, the cannons keep coming, up to 8 times a night.
მანქანა რო დავინახეთ რომ იყო ეს მოჭავლის იჩვეული ვიყავი და რა უნდა იყოს ახალი მაგრამ იდგა რაღაცა მძაფრი სული რომელიც აი სუნთქვას აძლიერებდა.
Gela Hasaya, a political activist, has been at the forefront of many anti-government protests for years. But this time, when faced with the water cannons, he quickly realizes there's something different about them.
წყალში იყო გარეული რაღაც ნივთიერება, რომელიც დასველებასთან ერთად წვავდა.
Many demonstrators like Gela start experiencing worrying symptoms: vomiting, shortness of breath, skin irritation.
ეს ადგილი მქონდა ყველაზე მეტად დამწვარი, ალბათ როცა აქ მომხდა ყველაზე მეტი, კანის აკერცვა, რაღაცა არანორმალური ქავილები. მან დამიდასტურა, რომ ეს არის რაღაცა უცხო ნივთიერებებისგან გამოწვეული რაღაც კანის პრობლემა. ეს რაღაცა ერთი თვე ეს პრობლემა მქონდა.
Many are left wondering what was being sprayed on them. And there's mounting pressure on the authorities to release details of what is in the water cannons.
თუმცა ყველა კონკრეტულ საშუალებაზე მე ხა ვერ მოგაზეთ ინფორმაციას, იმიტომ რომ ეს ხანგრძლივად გრძელდებოდა.
After being exposed to the water cannons himself, paediatrician and activist Konstantin Chakunashvili has begun a medical investigation to see if any symptoms have lasted longer than a month. The study involves nearly 350 protesters exposed to tear gas and the unknown chemical in the water cannons. It's difficult to separate the effects of these two measures, but 40% say they experienced skin irritation, like Gela, and that wasn't all.
2 in 3 who had cough, 1 in 2 had shortness of breath. High blood pressure was identified in 283 people. When someone comes up to you and tells you that they have some type of symptoms, that's an anecdotal evidence, right? So we were trying to collect actual data that can be quantified and we could see what type of symptoms are there.
That was ქუჩაზე გადავიდეთ, ხო? ანუ აქ აღარ არის ყოფნა უსაბ, ხო?
Tamar Onyani runs the Human Rights Abuse Unit at the Georgian Young Lawyers Association. She and her team have been documenting allegations of an unknown chemical used at the protests.
The information that there could have been some sort of a mixture of the unknown chemical irritants with the water came from the early days of the protest.
They've gathered testimonies from over 100 protesters. Their evidence suggests that the unknown chemical was being deployed throughout the first week of the protests.
There are thousands of people who were targeted by the chemical irritants, unknown chemical irritants to public.
From the outset, Tamar's organisation requests that the government releases the name of the chemicals. The medical community too is alarmed and at the same time writes a petition demanding to be told what is being used. No one is getting answers.
My role is to investigate allegations of torture and other ill treatment wherever they may occur.
Dr. Alice Edwards has been closely examining the situation in Georgia.
This is not the military. This is in a civilian setting where ordinary people are taking to the streets, and the state should be entirely transparent about whether they are using water cannons infused with different chemicals, as well as what those chemicals are. And that's not just for a broader democratic and transparency and legality reason, but it also allows individuals to take the decision about their own health and whether they're going to be in harm's way on the day.
There's no explicit international law to ban the use of chemicals in water cannons, but it's not recommended. If used, the effects would have to be temporary. Protests have been ongoing for 8 months, and Konstantin has just finished his study on the health impacts of exposure to chemicals used in that first week. His suspicions are confirmed. Crucially, there have been some long-term effects beyond 30 days for nearly half of the participants in the study. In some cases, Konstantin notices changes in the heart and lungs too.
We also identified that there was enlarged T waves, which might be due to hypoxia, which means that heart is receiving lack of oxygen, and the changes in the right atrium. We also identified that in long-term effects, some people had vomiting, nausea, and shortness of breath as well.
Konstantin's study has been accepted for publication in an international academic journal, but it hasn't identified the precise chemical compounds used in the water cannons. The authorities have always referred to it only as gas or other special measures.
თუ ხდება შეტევა და შტურმი ხდება, შეგიძლია გამოიყენო ედროულად გაზიც, წყალიც და სხვა სპეცსაშუალებების.
But we can reveal for the first time, with the help of a former police insider, the name and makeup of the chemicals that we believe were used against the protesters. Lasha Shegalashvili knows the equipment used by the riot police better than most. He worked for the riot police for more than 20 years and served as head of weaponry until 2022. He's been following events closely.
კადრები მახსოვს მამაკაცი რომელიც გამორბის ყვირისთან რომ რაღაც არის შერეული წყალში მე მაშინვე მივხვდი რომ ეს იყო სწორედ ის სითხე რაზეც ჩვენ ვსაუბრობდით.
He says that some of the water cannons used on the protesters were purchased in 2009. At that time, he says, he was asked to test a chemical mixture for the water cannons, which then turned out to be 10 times stronger than regular tear gas.
რაც შეეხება ქიმიურ სითხეს, რომელიც შედგება ორი კომპონენტისაგან, 34-39 ქიმიური ფხვნილი და 17-10 ქიმიური სითხე.
ქიმიური სითხის ტესტირება ჩვენ ჩავატარეთ, მაშინვე მალევე, როდესაც ეს მივიღეთ, ეს გამოიწვია იმაში, რომ დაახლოებით 2-მა მაგალითად ანუ გული აერიათ და არ წყიეს. გააქვს წვა, თვალების წვა, სუნთქვა გიჭირს, ანუ შენ თუ გას დაუშვა წიწაკის გას სუნთქავ პირს გააღებ და სუნთქავ შენ შეგიძლია ეს გადაიტანო, მაგრამ ამ ქიმიური სითხის შემთხვევაში არ შემიძლია ანალოგიური საშუალება მოვიყვანო მის ეფექტთან დაკავშირებით.
Lasher says he warned against the use of these chemicals while he was in his post, but his advice was ignored. He also says he stayed in contact with former colleagues who confirm that the same chemicals were still being used in the protests of 2024. The BBC spoke to another former high-ranking officer who also said the riot police continued to use the same chemicals after Lasher left. The chemical numbers don't tell you everything, so we asked Professor Christopher Holsteg to help us understand what they are. He's a world-leading expert in toxicology and chemical weapons. The first chemical, a liquid, is easily identified. UN 1710 is trichloroethylene, or TCE. It's a solvent that helps other chemicals dissolve in water.
So trichloroethylene is absorbed very well through the skin, through the lungs, and through the gastrointestinal tract. It impacts the nervous system, the cardiovascular system, can affect the liver. It is certainly not a chemical that I want thrown out to the masses during protests.
Identifying the second compound, the powder, is a tougher challenge. UN 3439 is a whole class of chemicals. But after examining our evidence, Konstantine's medical study, witness statements and human rights reports, Professor Holsteg and his colleague Dr. Sandra Nixon think they've narrowed it down. Camite, or Ca, was first used as a chemical weapon by French forces against the Germans at the end of World War I. It was then briefly used by American police as a riot control agent, but soon abandoned and replaced with safer options.
Camite is markedly irritating, persistent with its irritation, potential for causing more problems with your lungs, coughing, for example, potentially pneumonias. Not clear even if you drink some of this, what kind of symptoms you're going to have gastrointestinal, including vomiting. I think the question then comes, why would you utilize it? And part of it is the persistence. It would keep people away for a long time. They would have to go to the hospital. They would have to leave the area. If that is indeed the case, that this chemical has been brought back, that is actually exceedingly dangerous.
We showed our findings to the UN's Special Rapporteur on Torture.
The important point at international law is that any effects should be temporary. So longer term problems such as long-term respiratory issues or related to heart conditions, all of those cases should be investigated, including under the rubric of torture or other ill treatment. I would describe the water cannons infused with different toxins as entirely unnecessary. Given that it is poorly regulated internationally, it does lead me to consider it as an experimental weapon, and populations should never be subjected to experiments. This is absolutely in violation of human rights law.
For a year now, night after night, the streets of Tbilisi have been blocked by protesters. And almost every evening, Gela has been among them.
ხანდახან არის ხოლმე მომენტები, როცა ნიჰილისტური განწყობა მეუფლება და არის ფიქრები, რომ აქვს თუ არა აზრი საერთოდ იმას, რასაც ვაკეთებ. ეს გრძელდება რამოდენიმე წუთი და შემდეგ ეს ემოცია ქრება.
But to many, It seems the country is slipping into authoritarian rule.
Germany and Russia have a fascinating and complex history tied together through cycles of cooperation and conflict. After World War II, the Soviet Union occupied East Germany for more than 40 years, and it's here that the Berlin Wall, dividing the city in two, once stood. On this side of the wall, the Soviet-run German Democratic Republic, or GDR, became an outpost of Moscow's influence, with Soviet spies operating in plain sight. Even though the Berlin Wall has been gone for many years, the divide between East and West is still very much alive. People in the two parts of Germany often disagree with each other, including on Russia and the war in Ukraine. It was 100 miles south of here, in the East German city of Dresden, in the late 1980s, that a young KGB agent would spend 5 years honing his spycraft in his first foreign posting. Vladimir Putin's schooling in the former GDR underscores Russia's long-standing reliance on espionage. And today, Moscow is deploying even more sophisticated tactics. Germany has ramped up counterintelligence operations after repeated warnings from NATO that Moscow is using hybrid tactics, cyber warfare, propaganda, and covert operatives to destabilize European democracies. A critical part of Moscow's arsenal is the deployment of drones to target critical infrastructure, both from land and sea. In October, Munich Airport was forced to suspend operations twice in 24 hours after unidentified drone sightings. And authorities in Belgium and Denmark have also reported mysterious drone flights into their airspace, believed to have come from ships. EU member states are deeply concerned, with the European Commission warning of an escalation of tactics across Europe.
You're not talking about frontline countries anymore. You're not talking about eastern flank countries anymore. You're really talking about the European Union as a whole.
Germany has probably felt the impact of Russia's invasion of Ukraine more than almost any other country. A record number of Ukrainian refugees fleeing the war came here. More than 1 million now live in Germany, and tens of thousands have settled here, in Berlin. Over the past 4 years, hundreds of anti-war Russians have also moved in as their neighbors, people who left for Europe because they feared persecution at home. And as the Kremlin stepped up its crackdown on the opposition and independent journalism, Berlin turned into a home for many who could no longer stay in Russia. The presence of anti-war Russians here in Berlin is a reminder that Germany isn't just a political battleground. It's become a refuge for those resisting Putin's stranglehold on power. And there are high-stakes diplomatic strategies being played out. Berlin's Bridge of Spies became famous during the Cold War as the location for prisoner swaps between East and West. And in August 2024, Germany participated in the biggest prisoner exchange since the Cold War as part of a complex swap between Russia, the US, and other Western nations. Moscow's main prize was the release of Vadim Krasikov, a colonel in Russia's Secret Service sentenced to life in Germany for killing a Chechen dissident in a Berlin park. His release was met with controversy and debate here. That was a difficult choice for the decision makers in Germany's government, reflecting the broader debate of the country's role in European security. Germany's new Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, has made that role clear. He wants the German army to become the strongest in Europe. His ambitious spending plans were approved by a parliamentary majority, but not everyone supports his boost to the defense budget. Opposition includes the far-left Linke Party and the far-right AfD. Merz has pledged to do whatever it takes to protect freedom and peace. But like other European leaders, he will continue to face challenging decisions about how best to do that, as Russia intensifies its shadow war against the West. Now, here's some of the other great content from the BBC World Service that you can find this week. After the shocking abduction of more than 300 school children in Nigeria, the BBC News Africa team were the first international media to gain rare and exclusive access to Pipiri, the village from where they were taken. You can read more about how the community is coping on our website. And the country of Haiti has been ravaged by conflict and natural disasters in recent years. As a result, since 2010, hundreds of thousands of its citizens have been given special protected status to live in the U.S., but it's due to be removed soon as part of President Donald Trump's sweeping changes to immigration policies. Nawal Al-Maghafi has been to meet a family in Florida who risked being split up. You can watch her report on the BBC News YouTube channel. In recent months, Germany has been locked in a heated debate about bringing back compulsory military service. In 2011, believing in a peaceful future in the post-Cold War era, the country decided to end conscription. Now, with the war in Ukraine and uncertainty inside NATO, Germany is trying to rebuild its armed forces, all with the aim of increasing troop numbers and creating Europe's strongest army. For now, mandatory military service is on hold in Germany. But elsewhere, across 10 other European states, including Croatia and Latvia, it's either already in place or being reintroduced. In some of these countries, that has been extended to women too. But are they willing to be sent to war? Anna Hooligan has this report.
Europe is training more troops as tensions with Russia rise. Some countries are turning to conscription, requiring citizens to complete a period of military service. During the World Wars, only men could be forced to go to the front line. Now, some nations are drafting women too.
It's a big step to take because it's a way of saying this threat that we're facing is so important that everyone has to play their part, and everyone includes women.
It's created debate about who should serve.
In the situation that the world is in now, it's needed, I think, and I think it's only fair and right that women participate equally as with the men.
I do not want to die. I do not want PTSD, and also I'm scared about life in the battlefield as a woman.
So why is Europe rebuilding its armies now? And is there support for sending women to war? The modern concept of conscription began during the French Revolution when all men aged 18 to 25 had to report for duty. Other nations followed France's model in the 19th century, and in the World Wars, millions were conscripted.
Following the budget comes news of conscription.
Women were drafted too, working on farms, in factories, and in hospitals. Some served in the military, but they weren't sent to the front line. Across Europe, conscription policies were kept until the end of the Cold War, when hopes of lasting peace led many countries to phase it out.
The fall of the Berlin Wall, and there was a broad restructuring in a lot of European countries that happened of our militaries. Defense spending shrank, militaries shrank with them.
But some countries never suspended conscription, with Russia and several former USSR states also retaining forms of Soviet-era military service.
Those are mostly countries that are close to some sort of territorial threat, whether that is Greece and Turkey, or whether that is the countries that are bordering Russia.
In Norway, military service has always been mandatory for men as part of its constitution. But in 2013, the country voted to extend it to women, saying there should be equal rights and obligations.
Have access to parts of the population that men don't, for instance in intelligence gathering, to be able to communicate with the female part of the society in parts of the world that we do operations.
Typically, service lasts around a year, and former conscripts can be called back to the army for the next 26 years if needed. Following Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014, Ukraine and Lithuania reinstated compulsory military service for men. Sweden did too in 2017, this time including women.
Countries that have introduced conscription for women in Europe have tended to be Northern European countries, which are not only closer to Russia, but they're also countries that have valued gender equality very highly.
Russia's 2022 full-scale invasion of Ukraine further highlighted the need for European countries to grow their armies.
This has turned into a war of attrition where Ukraine has struggled to recruit enough troops to match Russia's rate of mobilization. And European leaders in frontline states have now warned that NATO could soon find itself at war with Russia.
Since Russia's invasion, these countries have made plans to bring back compulsory service for men, while these in blue are rolling out new voluntary military training programs. Denmark has also said it would extend its draft from 4 to 11 months, and that women would have to serve too. Fears President Donald Trump might withdraw US funding from NATO unless European partners step up defence spending have also driven a recruitment effort.
If they don't pay, I'm not going to defend them.
The reason why we are now reintroducing conscription is because of a greater threat from Russia, but also greater uncertainty as to whether we can still rely on the US security guarantee.
In most countries, people can refuse the military draft and opt for civilian service instead, but failing to reply to a call-up can lead to fines or even arrest. Denmark says it currently has enough volunteers to fill its ranks, and across the Nordic states, public support for female conscription is strong. But in other countries bordering Russia, like Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, it's much lower. Despite this, some politicians, like Latvian Defence Minister Andris Spruds, say women are needed.
Because we live next to aggressor country, because we need to strongly increase our comprehensive defense. Women, the gender-neutral approach, this is crucial in general. This is principle which strengthens our defense and our security of our people within specific nations, but also in NATO at large.
At the moment, these calls are just proposals, but a falling birth rate could make the situation more urgent.
The problem will arrive about 2040 because birth cohorts of the past 2 or 3 years have been so low that if we are still in the same security situation, then we will not have enough people.
Gender-equal conscription will mean armies need to make provisions for uniform and weaponry, which are largely designed for men, and there are fears about women operating in male-dominated environments.
Increasingly, we're seeing examples coming from European countries where women soldiers are very vulnerable to sexual harassment, abuse, assault, and militaries have struggled to understand how to deal with this.
But countries hope that despite the challenges, increasing defences like this will prevent future Russian aggression.
Thanks for joining me in Berlin. We want your feedback on Global Eye. Let us know what you think on social media using the hashtag BBC Global Eye. Next week, we'll be reporting from South Africa. Goodbye.